Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
No shoes or socks on, kind of with her head kind of down and her hair coming over her eyes with snot just running down below her chin.
An apology from the YMCA after a family accuses its daycare of discrimination. Also, dozens of noise complaints, parking tickets, and a stop and desist order. The Surrey Wedding that even featured a Ferris wheel. And
after 2 years, now it's super duper busy right now. Mostly import, so much import came here right now.
How the pandemic supply chain crisis is exposing cracks at Canada's biggest port right here in BC.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The YMCA is apologizing tonight and opening an investigation after admitting it failed to provide adequate care to a child with Down syndrome. A Vancouver family says their 6-year-old daughter was neglected and discriminated against while in their care. As the CBC's Michelle Gassoub reports, they say their experience is all too common for children with disabilities.
This is Kenzie at her preschool. This is the first take-home photo we've had of her, and she nailed it.
When the Jamesons signed up their twins for the YMCA's after-school program at Malkin Park in Kerrisdale, they did everything to make sure their daughter Kenzie would be safe and included.
I also created a 5-minute long sign video detailing all of the signs that Kenzie used, and I showcased them for all of the staff.
Kenzie has Down syndrome and is nonverbal, so the family secured funding for the YMCA to hire an extra support worker to care for Kenzie. But on the first day of the program, no one had been hired.
She had a wet diaper and it had gone through to her clothing, and nobody on staff at the YMCA was equipped to help her or assist her with it.
Weeks passed and still no extra support worker was brought in. The YMCA said it couldn't find anyone and never accessed the funding. The Jamesons increasingly worried for their daughter until they finally took her out of the YMCA program. They'd found Kenzie under a picnic table with wet pants where she'd been left for an hour, and heard from another parent she'd been spotted far from the rest of the kids with no supervision.
Katie arrived to find Kenzie on a cold afternoon in October in the middle of a playground with no shoes or socks on, kind of with her head kind of down and her hair coming over her eyes with snot just running down below her chin. Katie, rightfully so, drove home in tears, and that was the end of our experience with the YMCA.
The YMCA said in a statement, "We recognize in this specific instance we did not provide an adequate level of care for Kenzie. For that, we sincerely apologize. While we cannot undo what has transpired, we can assure our commitment to review, understand, and improve is sincere." The YMCA will also be launching an internal review, plus an independent review by a third party. The Jamesons say their daughter shouldn't have had to set a precedent.
It's absolutely mentally and emotionally exhausting to have to continually remind people and remind organizations and remind people who are caring for children that kids with disabilities matter just as much as everybody else.
They hope by sharing their story, other children like Kenzie will receive the care they need. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Dozens of noise complaints, parking tickets, and a stop and desist order. A wedding reception in Surrey is the talk of the town after it kept neighbors up until the early hours of the morning. As Benit Brach reports, it even featured a Ferris wheel.
Sky's the limit. A lavish wedding reception for Punjabi singer Parmesh Verma, who has 6.5 million Instagram followers, and his now wife Geet Garewal, a Liberal candidate in the last federal election. Perhaps a great time for guests, but neighbors not so much.
I understand that they're having a wedding, but it's a little bit much when they're pumping loud, bassy music like literally all night, and they don't seem to have much consideration for the neighborhood here.
That loud music late into the night prompted upwards of 50 noise complaints. But this wedding planner says elaborate events in the South Asian community have been long awaited with this pandemic.
Every moment, especially in the last 2 years, we've really learned we need to celebrate everything that comes our way because we don't know when things are going to change.
She says fewer than 130 guests attended, small in scale for an Indian wedding.
This was a very intimate celebration. Yes, was it big in terms of design? Was it big in terms of experience? Definitely. But was it big in terms of guests? Definitely not. We had local artists just joining us for the celebration. And then we really wanted to have a nice lighting feature for the reception, which is where the Ferris wheel came in.
Surrey's bylaw department says 15 parking tickets were handed out and several vehicles towed. And while neighbors blocks away complained, this one offered to lend her hand.
We helped them help them park here, as you see in the background. And it was because people were getting towed.
A unique experience, she says.
It was exciting. It was entertaining for sure. The music was great. People were awesome.
Entertaining for some. And now the talk of the town. This extravagant wedding is still keeping bylaw officers busy with illegal tents and electrical issues. Benit Brach, CBC News, Surrey.
While some COVID rules are set to ease, like going back to 100% capacity for fully vaccinated people, dancing is still not allowed. And as Janella Hamilton reports, businesses relying on people to boot, scoot, and boogie are hurting.
What was once filled with live music, fast feet, and swift moves now sits quiet with tables set 6 feet apart.
It's really sad because dancing is part of the Latin culture. Then listen our hearts.
Hugo Peros owns Mango's Kitchen Bar in Vancouver. He says he misses the days when people came together on the dance floor.
I've seen people from Asia, from Persia, Europeans, Latinos, you name it. Everybody together, there's only one thing, that they want to dance.
But for the past 2 years, that dance floor has sat empty, and the restaurant has had to rely on its Latin cuisine to survive.
And now we adapt, and this place is well known as a good restaurant.
Peros was hoping the province would lift restrictions on dancing once the BC vaccine card came into effect, but Dr. Bonnie Henry says indoor dance floors will have to remain closed. Hockey games, concerts, weddings, and other indoor venues will be allowed to operate at 100% capacity.
I'm confident that where this is happening, in those areas where we have high vaccination rates, that this will be a measure that is not going to increase risk and that we'll monitor it over time.
Some BC doctors say while the vaccination rate is high across Metro Vancouver, some vaccinations are beginning to wane.
We need to remind ourselves that when we're vaccinated, we're not bulletproof. We can still get infected, and we need to take proper precautions, especially indoors.
Masks will still be required in all public indoor spaces, and capacity restrictions are still in place for regions with rising COVID-19 cases, like Northern Health, Interior Health, and the Eastern Fraser Valley. Mask or no mask, dancing is still not allowed, a restriction Conway agrees with.
Dancing is a physical activity where people will be breathing harder, they'll be close to each other.
Peros says he understands the restrictions, but fears it will be hard to police.
You're selling food, alcohol, and now you have full capacity. And you're going to tell them, don't dance? Then that's going to be a little bit tough.
He hopes the rules will be relaxed next month so customers can shake their hips once again. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's daily cases have gone up to almost 700 today, with 6 more people dying. This surge in new infections has largely come from BC's north. Northern Health reported 191 new cases today. It also has the second highest number of active cases in BC at 864. 370 people are in hospital, with 139 in intensive care. More than 1,500 workers at Life Labs clinics around the province could be going on strike on Friday. They've been given without contract since April, and their union, the BCGEU, says wages are the main sticking point. They issued strike notice on Tuesday. Life Labs warns job action could impact some clinics, which could be closed on a rotating basis as early as Monday. But despite disruptions, Life Labs says most operations will continue as normal because they are an essential service. Well, the pandemic has shifted consumer behavior in Canada. People have spent less time going out and more time buying products online. But while demand for Chinese products remains high, exports from Canada are low. As Lindsay Duncombe shows us, that's creating a huge backlog right here in the Lower Mainland.
This is what a stressed supply chain looks like. Non-stop cargo Tetris in a crowded yard and a business owner in the middle of it trying to figure out what to do with all these containers.
Right now it's super busy. It's like after 2 years, now it's super duper busy right now. Mostly import, so much import came here right now.
Anita Bathe's transportation company picks up goods from the Port of Vancouver, delivers them to a customer, then returns the container to the port. At least that's the way it's supposed to work.
Right now you can see we have more than 100 containers sitting in my yard, right? Before it was like 40, 50, 60 container.
Many of these containers are empty, and there's little room at the port to return them. The congestion means transportation companies are working longer hours, paying more fees, and losing money.
Who's making money? Port's making money, and the shipping line's making billions of dollars. Yeah. And what do we get? We're squished right in the middle of the trucking companies.
Here's what's going on. The Port of Vancouver has avoided those long lines of ships seen in California, but volume at the port is hitting record highs, and way more stuff is coming into Canada than is going out.
Because COVID has had a dramatic effect on individuals' consumption. We've all been staying at home. We haven't been able to spend on services, on travel. So we bought stuff.
There is so much demand for goods from Asia, shipping companies are skipping a step in the normal back and forth of global trade. Rather than load containers with Canadian grain or potash, they want the empties back in Asia as quickly as possible. So they're piling up.
Because of this surge in imports, we're out of balance. The supply chain is out of balance. And that's causing congestion locally with a lot of empties.
The head of Canada's largest port believes demand patterns will normalize in the next several months, but he sees the congestion as a warning sign.
We're frustrated because we can see this problem's going to happen again because we're running out of capacity.
For consumers, the container crunch means two things: potential delays in stuff we order and higher prices. For Anita Bathe, it means less cash and more stress.
I don't have time to give my family.
A supply chain disruption, disrupting his life. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Vancouver Police Board is revising how officers use their handcuffs. This comes after police arrested an Indigenous man and his granddaughter outside a bank in downtown Vancouver last year. The board launched an extensive review into the incident, and after a retired Black judge was wrongfully arrested. The new policy, which is still under review, urges officers to exercise discretion and consider race, gender, and age, as well as people's individual dignity. For the moment, the VPD is withholding comment.
There is a police board meeting later this week on Thursday, so I'm not going to speak to anything prior to any decisions made.
The police board meets tomorrow. The policy will now undergo an external independent review. Well, it was 3 years ago today that Kennedy Stewart was elected mayor of Vancouver. During that time, he's made housing affordability, safe drug supply, and a SkyTrain to UBC his top priorities. So how has he done? Justin McElroy sat down with him to mark the anniversary and, of course, to give him his report card.
The mayor promises he's not thinking about next year's election.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm focused on right now is the job at hand.
But 3 years after he became the city's first independent mayor since 1986, it's worth considering whether he's made good on his three main goals: safe supply, a SkyTrain to UBC, and more affordable housing.
Every morning when I wake up, those are the three things I think about.
That was in 2019. Where are things in 2021?
I do think on the big stuff that Vancouverites care about, we actually have put in the time and made them happen.
But the truth is more complicated. On safe supply, the City of Vancouver put forward a formal request to be exempt from federal drug laws a year ago, and pilot programs are still limited.
The feds need to approve my application to decriminalize drugs in the city, and the province and feds have to do more on safe supply.
And a SkyTrain to UBC? Justin Trudeau has promised the money to get one to Langley City, but there's been no commitment to UBC yet. And it's still unknown whether he would get support from the TransLink Mayor's Council.
There'll be some key votes coming up, though, early next year that will determine the progress of that, and I'll fight for it as hard as I can at the Mayor's Council, which is always an adventure.
Which leaves affordable housing. There is more progress there, including funding from other governments for modular housing and purchasing hotels to convert them to shelters.
I think for the folks who are the worst off in Vancouver, the ones suffering the most, that's where I put most of my effort, and we've had I think some good success there.
But the average price of buying a home or renting an apartment has continued to go up under his watch, and it will take time to see if his pro-supply solutions work.
Housing takes a long time to build, we've sped up the permitting process on these, but it'll take a while to get folks in houses.
Asked Stewart if the city is better or worse since he became mayor, and he'll say what a lot of politicians have.
Well, I guess the thing we left out of the conversation is COVID. I mean, that has had a huge impact on all cities.
Which may be true, but means the mayor enters the final year of his first term with a few unanswered questions. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
The VPD is reporting replica explosives were found at a supervised injection site in Vancouver's downtown east side.
We have to take these calls very seriously and investigate them thoroughly. So what we want to do is warn the public. If you see anything suspicious, anything that resembles this, please don't touch it.
The 2 fake pipe bombs were discovered on Saturday. A police explosives expert was called in to destroy the devices. No arrests have been made, and an investigation is ongoing. Well, the cooler days mean you're being urged by FortisBC to stay safe while heating your home. The gas company is encouraging you to have your appliances checked before regular use and to make sure your home has proper ventilation to avoid carbon monoxide exposure. The potentially deadly gas can be produced when appliances aren't functioning properly. Carbon monoxide is odorless, so installing a carbon monoxide detector is encouraged. Exposure can cause dizziness, nausea, and possibly unconsciousness. A teenager in Chilliwack is encouraging more people to carry Narcan kits after she helped save a man from dying from an overdose. On October 8th, 17-year-old Fiona Dirksen and a friend were taking a break from their classes when they noticed people hovering around a man unconscious on the ground. Fiona had her first aid training as a lifeguard and proceeded to do CPR. They soon figured out the man was overdosing, but no one on site had a Narcan kit, which would reverse the effect of an overdose. Upon arriving, paramedics gave the man several doses of Narcan until he regained consciousness. Fiona got herself a Narcan kit after the incident and is pushing for more people to learn how to administer first aid and Narcan.
When I showed up, there were more people standing around than just the lady on the phone and the guy trying to wake the guy up. And out of all those people, I was the only one that had training.
She also says she took a few of her friends with her to get a Narcan kit. Fiona says she learned how to be a lifeguard after a family member drowned. Meanwhile, a BC Green MLA is sharing his journey with drug use to help break down the stigmatization of addiction.
The destigmatization of addiction requires people who have experienced addiction to talk about it and to say, look, there is a long, bright future ahead of a lot of people in our society, and we need to give them that chance.
The MLA for Saanich North and the Islands says addiction ran in his family and he used cocaine regularly in his 20s. He credits his wife for helping steer him away from serious harm. Now he hopes his experience will help push the province on safe drug supply and faster supports for people who need treatment. BC's toxic drug crisis has killed thousands of people. Olsen plans to speak about his experience in the legislature tomorrow. Well, if you've noticed, evenings at Stanley Park have been quite different lately, a little quiet. It's not your imagination. The 9 o'clock gun has been silent for more than a week. The nightly cannon blast has been stifled due to repairs. On September 29th, a falling tree damaged the building that preps the gun for firing. City crews are working to fix the damage, but no timeline is set for completion. So until then, 205-year-old cannon will keep quiet. Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe is here now. And Joe, I gather you have some, well, I guess it's good news for those people who love those big, big storms. So maybe we're talking the surfers of Tofino.
Yes, that's right. If you are a storm watcher, I've got a great forecast for you. Everyone else, you might not love what I'm about to tell you. We've got 2 more big low pressure systems to hit the south coast. Today was actually storm 1 of 3. And we already have wind warnings in place for parts of the South Coast with the second system. But let's start with the good news for those who aren't storm watchers. Nice little break between now and tomorrow afternoon. Let me take you through the big picture. You can really see the storms I'm tracking. The first one now pulling up into the Alaskan Panhandle. That sort of dotted line, that's an area of low pressure that brought us the rain today. It's still skirting through the interior with showers tonight. The next biggie is this low pressure system. And some of you may have heard rumblings of a weakening typhoon crossing the Pacific. This is that storm. Earlier concerns it would actually move over Metro Vancouver, but now it just looks to skirt up the coast. However, still bringing some big winds. We've got wind warnings in place for Tofino for gusts over 100 kilometers per hour, and Port Hardy, 120 is a Category 1 hurricane equivalent. We're seeing those all the way up to Haida Gwaii for tomorrow. So very windy in the forecast, but not quite for us, Anita. It'll be a windy and wet afternoon, but I'll take you through to, let's see, storm number 3, which could be a big one later on in the show.
Okay, thanks, Jo.
You're welcome.
It's a first for Canada. An Indigenous artist has designed an alternate logo and jersey for a university sports team.
To be a timber wolf is to be greater than oneself. A flame in a bonfire, a drop in a river, a stone in a mountain. We are the pack.
The University of Northern British Columbia Timberwolves have unveiled their new uniform designed by Gitxsan artist Trevor Angus. Angus attended UNBC from 2000 to 2003 and was asked by the athletic department to redesign and give his own interpretation of the Timberwolves logo. The designs will be featured on the uniforms of the basketball and soccer team.
And having the sports players as ambassadors to teach, and so that they're learning more about where they at and where they play as well, is really important. And UNBC has been doing that. The players are taking part in different events at the First Nations Center, like drum making and that type of thing, to recognize and learn some of the history.
Angus says the logo is a first step in having his culture and traditions recognized, and that it will further deepen relations between the Timberwolves and communities in northern BC. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. I'm your host, Anita Bathe. And please join us on CBC Gem. That's our free app. You can also watch us on Facebook or YouTube. Placed on leave for using the N-word in a classroom setting, why the incident is sparking calls for further action. Next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream. Well, some elementary school kids in Charlottetown may soon learn how to compose EDM music. They were supplied with instruments called MIDI keyboards, small pianos equipped with finger drum pads. Laura Meter visited one school and got a sneak peek of the new tech.
Music class just got more cool at Sherwood Elementary School thanks to these keyboards. They're called MIDI controllers, and they make hundreds of sounds. Students can play and compose music with them.
I think it's fun that you mix like electronics and music, and I think it just makes music a lot more fun.
Yeah. They're like a mini keyboard, like a mini piano with a drum pad on it. You can do a lot of things on them.
What was the name of your song, Sam? This music teacher will soon have 25 of them in her class, thanks to funding from the Canada Post Community Foundation. She was thrilled her request was approved because this gets kids excited about music.
They grow up with this technology. It comes naturally.
Students will learn basic piano, and these keyboards hooked up to a computer are like mini music studios, letting students mix and record music.
They could change the notes, they could change the speed, they could add layers, so they could add a track 1 and then add a second track 2 or track 3 and mix it all up to make a song.
And with headphones, it's easy for kids to concentrate, something that can be harder with more traditional instruments.
And they can focus on their own sound without having to hear everyone else in the room at the same time. Let's see how many sounds, I think 120?
She says during a pandemic, it's also nice to have a way to do online music classes too. For now, however, they're all just excited to get more of these keyboards in the classroom and see what they can mix and record at school. Laura Meter, CBC News, Charlottetown.
A teacher at a Winnipeg high school has been placed on leave after using the N-word. The incident caused a stir in the classroom, which was caught on camera and reignited a heated discussion about racism in schools. As Jill Kubra reports, the incident is spurring more calls for action.
The heated argument was captured on video and posted to Snapchat.
You are not allowed to sit in. No, you did not respect us. The minute you said the word, you did not respect us. The minute that word came out of your mouth, you did not respect us at all.
Parents Against Racism denounced the teacher's use of the N-word during the class discussion. The group called the use of the word dehumanizing to Black students. It formed last year after previous allegations of racism at the school. The group says the latest incident shows a culture of normalized racism. Blandine Tona is a member of Parents Against Racism. She calls the situation disheartening and says the division needs to do more.
Again, people need to know that racism didn't come because of people having intention of harming. It's coming because of people feeling privileged into doing things that at the end of the day are harming. So if you know that you can say things that may be harmful, you have to be literally listening and sensitive into how people are reacting to what you do. And I didn't see any of that in the attitude that was happening, and I was really, really, really surprised and disappointed.
Parents Against Racism is calling on the division to put clear anti-racism policies in place to address and prevent racism. They want an end to any racial insult in any context, and they want consequences for writing or uttering insults. The division responded in an email to CBC News. It says the school has more work to do. The division says it's meeting to discuss the incident and will be forming 4 advisory groups to come up with a concrete plan this fall. They say help is available to staff and students who need to talk. It's not known if the teacher is on paid or unpaid leave. Still, Parents Against Racism says they're not satisfied with the response and think it's reactionary. Jill Kubra, CBC News, Winnipeg.
An Indigenous woman is speaking out after she says she was discriminated against at a Winnipeg branch of the Bank of Montreal last month. As Aaron Broman reports, it was just days before a major march for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation.
Vivian Ketchum went to the bank looking to open an account. She was drawn in by the words on the windows.
I go in and I see the security guard and he says, "Are you going to do like any banking?" And I said, "No, I'd like to look around." He told me to leave, so I left, but I kind of got mad. I said, I came back and I said, I would like to talk to the bank employee, but again, my mouth is frozen.
She'd just been to the dentist and walks with a limp. She believes the guard thought she was drunk.
And as I'm talking to the bank employee at the counter, the security guard comes and interferes and starts arguing with me. And even after the bank employee told him it was okay, I said, forget it, I'll come back another day.
She contacted the bank manager, who apologized. Ketchum made an appointment and returned a few weeks later. As she waited, the same security guard asked her to leave again. Alan Sutherland provides historical cultural awareness training. He says it's a positive sign Ketchum was drawn in by the word on the windows, and employers need to make sure that all staff uphold it.
It's the onus of the bank to ensure that everyone that works in that environment must abide by the call of action. And what is the call of action? Is to know Indigenous history, to know systematic racism and discrimination and prejudice that are prominently is what shaped this country.
A spokesperson for the bank says 85% of their staff have completed Indigenous cultural training, and they're looking into options for contracted workers like security. Ketchum appreciates the bank's response.
He called me early this morning and apologizing profusely for what happened, and that he's going to make sure that security guard is no longer working there.
But the residential school survivor wants an apology from the guard. She was proud to be among those who marched past this bank in September and calls this experience a bump on the road to reconciliation. Erin Broman, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Canada's recovering economy seems to be at a crossroads. With COVID restrictions eased, Canadians are spending again, but the buying power of the money is being undermined in a way we haven't seen in nearly 2 decades. Anita Bathe looks at how it's hitting some Canadians already struggling during the pandemic.
4 of them, I paid out of pocket.
This Toronto mom tracks her grocery bill down to the penny.
Even if it changed by 5 cents, I'm gonna notice.
With 6 kids, the bills add up quickly. So Kanisha Harry uses couponing to stretch her dollars further. A strategy she shares with others on social media.
Let's go to Freshco.
Usually that was the cheapest. That skyrocketed. I remember the prices used to be $177, then it went to $188, $199, and then it went to $229, and now it's $249.
She's one of many Canadians trying to cope with rising food prices. With the price of meat up almost 10%, while dairy costs are more than 5% higher.
When you're feeding thousands of people, those percentage points really create a challenge.
For this Ontario Food Bank, the higher prices are the latest blow after higher demand.
The pandemic created an extreme challenge for us. We saw a sharp increase in the number of people that needed our services.
Canadians are also paying more for gas, cars, and shelter. And the price pressures are a concern worldwide, driven by global supply chain issues, factory closures, and strong consumer demand. Some economists say the situation could last longer than expected.
It seems that these sorts of issues can run all the way until the second half of 2022. And if that's the case, that would mean that we have higher price pressures for many months now.
So for many households, the higher cost of living isn't going away anytime soon. For now, Harry isn't too worried, as long as she sticks to her plan.
I just make sure that each week I get to my flyers and I look through my flyers. Even when I am tired, I still do it because I know if I don't, I'm going to go to the store and pay full price for product.
The CBC's Nisha Patel reporting tonight. Senior members of Afghanistan's Taliban government are in Moscow this week for talks on the future of the country. Delegates from 10 countries, including China, are involved. The Taliban is reaching out for more international support, but as Briar Stewart reports, they're facing a number of big hurdles.
13 members of the Taliban took part in talks that were held in this hotel in Moscow today. It involved officials from Russia, China, Pakistan, and India. And this was one of several meetings that the Taliban has taken part in recent days. They've spoken to officials from the U.S. and Turkey, and the group is very keen to have countries around the world recognize the Taliban officially as the new government for Afghanistan. But of course, this is a difficult conversation as many nations continue to recognize the Taliban as a terrorist group. In terms of the delegation that was here, it included some very senior members of the Taliban government, the Minister for Information, who was a former detainee at Guantanamo Bay, and the Foreign Affairs Minister. I had a chance to speak with him, and I asked him why he thinks countries should recognize the Taliban, considering its track record. And he said that if countries don't have relations with Afghanistan and it leads to more isolation, it could create more instability. Now, we understand that during the 2-hour talks, there were some disagreements, but officials would not elaborate on that. There was no statement about, international recognition of the Taliban, but officials from Russia are calling for the UN to host a conference to talk about foreign aid to Afghanistan. There's a lot of concern about the current food shortage there, particularly now that the colder months are approaching. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Moscow.
From toilet seats to toothbrushes to a surprising number of laundry baskets. The new technology taking on ocean trash. That's next.
Yeah, so we carry basically all the top of the line stuff. We carry
At 23, Kevin Harris is just about ready to retire from one business and start into another. As of this call from Newfoundland, his new distributing company has spread right across Canada, capturing more and more of a growing market. Harris has $1 million worth of orders, and he's rushing to keep up with the demand. What do they all want? Skateboards. Skateboarding is hot. This year, kids and their parents dished out about $15 million in Canada, well over $50 million in the US. What's it all about? It's about having the right stuff, making the right moves, dreaming of being like this. Kevin Harris is a skateboard champion, ranked the best freestyler in Canada and second best in the world.
Right there, I took that class from you at the rec center. Oh, yeah?
As long as he is a champion, Harris is a valuable selling tool for his sponsor, Powell Peralta, a giant U.S. skateboard manufacturer. So valuable, they named a board after him.
it's really Canadian influenced graphics. I figure that down in the States and in Europe and stuff, it wouldn't sell all that great because of the Canadian graphics, but it's one of the hottest selling freestyle boards in the market right now, so can't complain, I guess.
Skateboard stores all across Canada are cashing in on the craze. They're selling California fantasy, the music, the logos, the attitude, slightly taboo, totally irresistible. Rick Tetz owns a store called California Streets and claims to be one of the most successful.
Well, I opened up with approximately $6,000 inventory, and now I've got $85,000 inventory in less than a year and a half.
Peer pressure is obviously good for business.
We've had parents come in with their charge checks with 2 kids with safety gear, 2 boards, the whole bit, and it's cost them $1,100.
It breaks down like this. A top-of-the-line deck costs about $65. Then there are wheels, trucks, nose guards, curb hoppers, decals. You want to be cool? You better dress right. Shoes, $65. Knee pads, $65. Shorts, about $70. A t-shirt, at least $20. Elbow pads, $65. Gloves, $40. Wrist bracelet, $40. A helmet, $30. It all adds up to about $700. Is it a fad that'll just fizzle out the way it did in the 70s? The big American companies are counting on staying power. So is Kevin Harris. Harris's company, Ultimate Skateboard Distributors, is in a winning position. His sponsor, Powell Peralta, gave Harris exclusive rights to distribute their boards in Canada. If skateboarding lasts, Harris will just keep filling orders. To help things along,
Here are some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
She had a wet diaper and it had gone through to her clothing, and nobody on staff at the YMCA was equipped to help her or assist her with it.
A Vancouver family says it has pulled 2 of their children out of a YMCA after-school program, alleging the program discriminated against and neglected their 6-year-old daughter who has Down syndrome and failed to hire a support worker the family had secured funding for. The YMCA is now apologizing for not meeting the standards of care. A lavish wedding featuring a Ferris wheel in Surrey has become the talk of the town. The Monday night affair has received more than 50 complaints for noise and parking. Bylaw officers issued a stop and desist order and towed several vehicles. The wedding reception was that of Punjabi singer Parmish Verma and former Liberal MP candidate Geet Grewal. Well, an enormous amount of garbage is floating in the ocean between Asia and North America. It's known as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. The world's largest accumulation of trash is concentrated in several huge piles and also freely bobbing around on the currents. The group now believes it has a solution called the Ocean Cleanup. The nonprofit is building and testing technology to get rid of the ocean's plastic. Some early results were brought back to the shore today into Victoria Harbour. I'm joined now by Boyan Slat, the CEO and founder of the Ocean Cleanup. Thanks for being on the show today.
Pleasure.
Now, this garbage patch is really incredible. It's quite something. So tell me about what's in it.
Yeah, so this Great Pacific Garbage Patch is an area, it's twice the size of Texas. It's halfway between here, Victoria, and Hawaii. And once the plastic is in these currents, it's stuck like the gap, the hole of your bathtub. It can't escape, and that's why the plastic accumulates there. And the stuff that you pull out is really crazy. I mean, you have things like brushes. You have I see some fins of scuba divers. There's a bunch of toothbrushes. So it's really, a lot of it is from fishing industry, but you also see a lot of these kind of objects that are clearly recognizable to us on land.
That's amazing. I was just going to ask, where is all that coming from? But you've been testing this new technology out at sea to actually clean up some of that marine garbage. How does that actually work?
Yeah, so the inspiration came from looking at coastlines. If you go to a beach, you see a lot of plastic. It's out of the ocean, so that's a good thing. But of course, in the middle of the ocean, where these patches are, there are no coastlines to collect the plastic. So that's why we said, why don't we build our own artificial coastline? So really what the system that we've tested now, that we've now proven to work, is a half-mile long barrier that's towed between two vessels at a very slow speed. And that way we can first concentrate the plastic to then periodically take that on deck and bring it to land for recycling.
So you just mentioned you bring it to land for recycling. I imagine you can't recycle all of the things that you actually collect. So what happens to that garbage that can't be recycled?
Yeah, well, actually, with our preparations, we have been able to develop the processes to recycle about 95% of the trash. The rest will be going to the well-managed waste infrastructure, so likely incineration, but really the majority is going to be recycled. And through that, we actually hope to create a revenue stream as well by making durable, sustainable products to then help fund the continuation of the cleanup.
That's really incredible. So how do you think that your technology could change the world?
Well, the thing is, at the Ocean Cleanup, we're really doing two things. We're trying to stop the plastic in rivers before it goes into the ocean, but at the same time, there's this Great Pacific garbage out there. It's not going away by itself. So hopefully by deploying a fleet of roughly 10 of these systems in the years to come, we hope to clean up this Great Pacific Garbage Patch and do the first 50% in the next 5 years.
Well, thank you for doing that work. It's really great. Boyan Slat, CEO of the Ocean Cleanup. Thank you. Netflix employees walked off the job today. Why their anger is directed at both Dave Chappelle and their employer. Next. And at 6:42, you are looking at a live shot of Science World lit up in green. If you're a fan of a good fall storm, Johanna has some treats in store. The full forecast is coming up.
If walls could talk, where would the voice come from? In the case of one Halifax home, from within. Renovations led to a fascinating discovery. Among the trove of aged, warped pages, a face of a woman unknown to them. In the photo, she wears a high-collar, ruffled blouse, hair that's neatly coiffed.
I think it's quite old. I think it's over 100 years old. I'm not a historian, really, and I'm not a fashion expert by any stretch. But when I look at the clothing that she's wearing, my guess is that the photo was taken in the late 1800s or very early 1900s.
A little sleuthing. Warford discovers the photo was taken in Halifax by one Harry J. Moss. She wants to find this woman's family.
There's so much history packed into these homes, and there's a lot of families like that grew in these houses that found their footing, that kind of grew up together in these houses that we would just, we would love to kind of give back to the families that created a space that was available for us to move in at the right time for us.
The house itself is a time capsule. It's one of the many built for families displaced by the Halifax explosion in 1917. Some items date their findings. A rent receipt from 1924 for $25 and a Christmas card that never made it to its destination.
The Burns family was the second family to live here. And in 1923, they tried to send a card to Dorchester, Massachusetts, and it never went. And it's just, it's such a relatable thing.
The artifacts are a snapshot of life from that time.
We found a Simpsons catalog from 1930 to 31, and they're advertising. It's very pandemic-esque. They're advertising if you get your order in by 3:30, they will guarantee delivery the next day, which is sort of something that we've seen popping up again recently. One of my favorites is a coupon that says, "This coupon and 5 cents entitles any school child to admission to the Halifax Poultry and Pet Show to be held at the Armories November 29, 30, and December 1st and 2nd. There's something about that just I just think is so cool.
With the renovations complete, the house is up for sale. Warford has put a call out on social media to see if they can find the mystery woman's family. She says more mysteries may still await the next owners.
We didn't open up any walls upstairs, so who's to say what's hiding on the next floor?
Bob Murphy, CBC News, Halifax.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Celebrate the achievements and resilience of women with CBC Vancouver's Angela Starrett at the annual Dress for Success Luncheon. Learn more at vancouver.dressforsuccess.org. And CBC Vancouver returns as exclusive media sponsors of the Corleone Men's Choir. Don't miss their upcoming Remembrance Day concerts in November. Learn more at corleone.org.
Meteorologist and seismologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now. And Johanna, I know you're tracking yet another volcano, so I have to ask, is there something going on with all this seismic activity?
Yeah, Anita, you're not the only one posing that question. A lot of people wondering if this new volcano erupting in southern Japan today, connected to the Canary Islands, different tectonic settings, but the Earth is often active. I've got to take you to the video earlier today. It's a very different looking volcano than the one we've seen of late. Look at all of that ash, a huge amount, a huge column of gray smoke erupting 3.5 kilometers into the atmosphere. There's also a pyroclastic flow, which is basically a fast surge of hot ash and rock down the western slope. Ash ejected as far away as 1 kilometer, covering some nearby communities, but amazingly, no injuries or damages reported. And this is because this section of southern Japan is fairly unpopulated. A lot of hikers in the area. This is Japan's largest and most active volcano. It's actually 24 kilometers in width. So the alerts are still high, but going back to your initial question, Anita, at any given time, 20 to 60 volcanoes on the Earth are erupting. Just to give you an idea of how active the Earth is, but we really only talk about them when they're close to home. Bringing you closer to our home, 12 right now in through Vancouver, 12 out towards the west coast, and Tofino, as I mentioned earlier, getting some big winds over the next 24 hours. Big temperature swings for us in Metro Vancouver. Just wanted to show you what the swings we're looking at through to the weekend. Big bump up in temperatures tomorrow. It'll be notably warm. Our warmest day in probably 6 weeks for Metro Vancouver, and then coming back down to our seasonal of 12 after that. Watching clearing skies overnight tonight. We should see some sunshine nice and early. Some lingering drizzle not out of the question, but I think we'll see some breaks in the cloud. This model not doing too good of a job showing those breaks, but we'll get something before the steady rain moves in tomorrow early evening. It is going to be a heavy rain event Thursday overnight into Friday, and that does come with some gusty winds even for us on the south coast. But the main event, certainly the west side of the island, north side of the island, and up towards Haida Gwaii. Look at the center of the low approach for Thursday afternoon. That's where we're looking at hurricane force winds. We've got our windiest day still ahead. I'm thinking after that washout Friday, we'll get a few weekend breaks, but Sunday night into Monday could be another windy one. Anita, I'm still hoping for the pumpkin patch Saturday afternoon. That holds for now.
Okay, fingers crossed. Give me a call in the morning. Let me know what it's going to be like. And
I'll give you the latest forecast for sure. No problem.
Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
Video streaming service Netflix has been hit by an employee walkout. Workers picketed the company's Los Angeles headquarters over the latest special by comedian Dave Chappelle. It's a big hit for Netflix, but as Eli Glasner reports, some staff say it presents a dangerous message about those who are gay or transgender.
I am not saying that to say that trans women aren't women.
In his new special, The Closer, comedian Dave Chappelle says he doesn't hate trans women. But Chappelle goes on to say gender is a fact, adding many jokes about female anatomy and using washrooms. The special has been a hit with fans but caused tension inside the company. A trans employee organizing a walkout was fired, while Netflix co-CEO Ted Sarandos released an internal memo saying content on screen doesn't translate to real-world harm. Alice Rose is a trans comedian based in Toronto.
It's not the fact that I'm offended that's fueling my disdain for this special. I feel like it's incorrect, and it's validating very, very incorrect and harmful assumptions.
Rose says she's already preparing for a new wave of hurtful messages.
When other comedians and other people see that Dave Chappelle has this platform where he's number 4 on Netflix, where he has millions of viewers, and he can say something that is transphobic, these people feel like they can say something that is also transphobic.
Helen Lewis is a staff writer with The Atlantic and says Chappelle is very important for Netflix.
These are expensive shows for, an hour-long stand-up set. So I think they're really attached to him as a commercial proposition.
Now the streaming platform is caught between protecting its talent and its workforce.
Do you have to have a company line on not just how you treat your staff, but what kind of products you make?
But as Netflix defended Dave Chappelle, other comedians spoke out, including Hannah Gadsby, a lesbian comic with her own special on Netflix, who blasted Ted Sarandos, saying Netflix didn't pay her enough to deal with the real-world consequences of hate speech. Today, as some employees walked out, supporters spoke out in front of Netflix headquarters.
To have something like Dave Chappelle's special not be noted that it's promoting discrimination and hate conversation is very hurtful.
As for Chappelle himself, at a recent sold-out concert, he quipped, "If this is what being cancelled is like, I love it." Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, she might not have all 4 legs, but she's got everything else. Meet the fair pup, Fanny, a star in the making, next.
As people wander onto the viewing platform that overlooks the legendary Peggy's Cove Lighthouse, the reviews on day 1.
Beautiful overlook of the bay. It is spectacular.
This is the first time I've seen this in full glory, and this is beautiful.
Rocky Peggy's Cove. For anyone with mobility issues, this provides accessibility.
This allows me to get close to the water, to be able to go on the rocks. It's just awesome, and I also think it's really good for somebody in wheelchairs.
Does it make it easier for you to access this, do you find?
It does.
Accessibility was a huge reason the platform was designed and built. Plus, in storms, this, rather than the rocks, will be a safer place to view those giant waves people like to watch. Still, there was pushback. when the drawings were first released, a Facebook group called Save the Natural Beauty of Peggy's Cove was born.
It was a terrifying project.
Award-winning architect Omar Gandhi's firm designed the project.
You know, I think flirting with something that meant so much to so many people. And in a way, I didn't ever blame people for feeling nervous about it.
Just to remind people what used to be here, an asphalt road for buses and cars. Now there's no vehicular traffic in the front. They had to extend into the giant granite rocks for part of the cantilever deck. But the viewing platform isn't the only new addition to Peggy's. They raised the road up 3 meters to prevent flooding that's happened in the past and expect it to continue with rising sea levels. They built boardwalks for safe walking when the parade of buses returns. Old fishing sheds were reworked or rebuilt. And finally, there are public washrooms. So much of this was needed. Still, when you're working on a place considered to be a masterpiece,
also playing with, you know, a landmark that isn't just the most well-known thing in Nova Scotia. It's one of Canada's jewels. And so, of course, there was that, you know, aspect of it. And so how can we come up with something that's both organic and inclusive?
For those who came on opening day, they say a beautiful place just got prettier.
In with a natural surrounding, beautiful.
By the way, you can still climb the rocks, but not those black ones. Stay off of those. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Peggy's Cove.
One of the hikers who saved a man from going into a rushing river at Golden Ears Provincial Park is recounting how he and 4 of his friends jumped to the rescue. On Thanksgiving Monday, they saw someone had slipped on slick rocks and into the water. The quick-thinking and resourceful men used their clothes and turbans to make a rope and pulled the hiker to safety.
Firstly, we are trying to find something like a rope or something like that. So one of my friend, Gagandeep Singh, is with us out that day. So he gave us idea, why can't we use our turbans and jackets to make a rope? And they started untying their turbans, and we made like a rope around 10 to 12 meters long.
He says he and his friends were nervous because of the dangerous conditions. They are now being celebrated as heroes. And Fanny is a Canadian pup with 3 legs and an incredible tail. After a very low year, she's now taking a turn in the spotlight. She's one of the stars of a 2022 calendar that features pets and animals with mobility challenges.
Come on. She's had a pretty rough year, as everyone has. She just had a little bit rougher than most. Come on. My name is Kristen, and this is Fanny. She is a 5-year-old wire-haired pointing Griffon. Fanny just won a place in the Walkin' Pets 2022 calendar, a calendar focused on dogs and cats and cows who need assistance with their mobility. So Fanny uses a 4-wheeled wheelchair at this point. Okay, Fanny, here's your wheelchair. I follow Walkin' Pets on their social media, and they posted that they were taking entries for their calendar for next year. And I thought Fanny was pretty photogenic, and she benefited so much from the wheelchair itself through her recovery from her accident that I thought it would be great to get the word out about these products as well. It was a good thing for her to do. In November of last year, she was upstairs in a friend's loft. She was frightened by an Amber Alert. She only has 3 legs, but she managed to still climb up and out a window, and she fell roughly about 50 feet. She fractured her vertebrae in 5 places, and she fractured a few smaller bones in her one front leg that she still had, and she was quite critical. She was put on supportive oxygen, and she was in the ICU for a little over 3 weeks, and she managed to get out and get home just before Christmas, which was great. She was just a lot of time in recuperation with a back brace and a lot of therapy and a lot of rehab. Trying to recover a dog with a broken back is difficult. Trying to recover a dog missing a front leg with a broken back is multitudes more difficult because of the bouncing they have to do to walk. They're not very stable in the first place. So that chair was a godsend for us because it kept her stable, it kept her steady, and it gave her that support she needed to recover.
So great and lovely to see. You can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Dan Burritt is here at 11 o'clock tonight after the National with more local news. Have a good night.